This video is going to cover how to engage the audience and creating an outline. So we're going to start with the writing process. Keep in mind with the rhetorical canon, we're still in invention because we are going to be talking about how to develop the material, but we are also moving on to arrangement because we're going to be talking about how to organize the material. Now, as far as engaging the audience, keep in mind that a passive audience, an audience that is not doing anything, is a bored audience, and that's not what you want. So if we think about the rhetorical situation or the rhetorical triangle, you have to think, who is your audience, who is it that you're trying to speak to, and how can you most effectively address them, which is obviously going to make you an effective speaker. You also want to consider your purpose. Now, of course, you are going to be educating and informing the audience. So if you're taking on the role of an educator, you want to keep in mind the way in which people learn. So different learning styles. We, of course, have auditory. Now, to some degree, you speaking, the speech is going to be auditory. Visual, and using visual material like the non-factuals that we talked about will compromise or involve that. And then tactile or kinesthetic. So this is what we're going to be mainly focusing on, how to create a hands-on experience for your audience. The way in which you'll do that is through a couple of different techniques. One is just really simple. Ask a question to your audience. Now, this can be effective if you do it right. I have students sometimes who will ask really vague questions or something like, how's everyone doing? And the audience doesn't really know how to respond. So make sure that you are specific. In particular, use questions that are yes or no. Those are most effective. Encouraging interaction. You can do that in a couple of ways. Poll the audience. So instead of maybe asking something of them, you can make them raise their hand so they don't have to call out something. Asking for a verbal response, so this is kind of similar to asking a question, and getting the audience to do something physical. I once had a student who did a speech on CrossFit, and he actually got the audience up to do something physical, like doing a CrossFit move, which was very effective. Calling out specific listeners, so you can call people out from the class, give them a heads up first, of course, but if you want to, for instance, say, I was talking to Mark the other day and he said that he was paying this much for his classes because he's out of state. If, say, you're maybe talking about out of state and in-state tuition, using someone in the class as an example can be really good for that. Asking for a volunteer, so you could maybe bring someone up to do something. I had a student who did a speech on the flu, and she brought a student up to show how to properly wash your hands, which actually a lot of people don't do. And then humor. This is optional, so if you don't feel comfortable doing humor, that's perfectly fine. I also wouldn't really specifically plan it in the outline. And of course, keep it appropriate. As far as involving the audience, I'm going to give you an example a student used. This was for iPhones in the class. He was doing a speech on tracking devices and technology. And what he did was he asked the students to pull out their phone, and if you didn't have an iPhone, you could share with someone. He said, go into your settings and go to privacy, and then location services. Once you got there, you could see your history. I'm actually using screenshots from my phone to show you. And then you could see where you had been in a particular area, and then it would give you the time and date that you were there. And this activity was really effective because it floored students by showing them that their phones were actually doing this. So that was something that really helped in the learning process of the speech because it made that technique memorable and it made it real for students. Now what I'm going to show you are two speeches from the World Science Festival. They're similar to TED Talks. They're obviously science focused, of course. What I want you to do is look at how these speeches are using the techniques that I just talked about.
Talking about expectations. Watch. Ba, ba. Okay.
what does Disney have to do with science? Roller coasters. Who likes roller coasters?
This vest is equipped with an accelerometer and a data recorder, so we can get a live readout of the G-forces you're feeling while you're on the ride.
That's cool.
That's physics.
All right, let's get him in. Feeling comfortable?
Kind of.
Then you're not paying attention. Special effects. What do you got for us today?
They brought along a couple of special effects and thought this would be a great opportunity to try them out in front of a live audience. We're actually sending sound out at a free.
So a couple of things to notice from these videos, both of them were really effective in utilizing a lot of the techniques, right? They asked questions, they asked for feedback, they brought up a volunteer. Obviously, I know you won't have a machine to put a volunteer in, but even using humor, right, getting the audience to sing along, all those sorts of things were effective. So this is something that even professional speakers use. So remember, you need to start thinking of ways in which you can do this to keep your audience interested in the actual speech. All right, arrangement. So now we're moving on to the next canon. We're going to talk about how to create the outline. So when you're setting up the outline, you have three parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Now, a lot of people think, okay, well, this is pretty much similar to an essay. That's not too tough. But remember, unlike an essay, if the audience gets lost, right, or let's say maybe their learning style is different, they need to learn at a different pace, they really can't do that. In an essay, you can read at your own pace, right? You can go back, you can do whatever you want. In a speech, you don't have that option. The pace is set by the speaker. So it's extremely important that you break information down and you organize it effectively. So that's why the arrangement step is really important. So first step is the introductions. So let's talk about what you need in your introduction. There's a couple of things you want to do. So you want to focus on the audience by adding interest, and that's going to be through your attention getter. You want to connect to your audience through your value step. You want to put you in your presentation. You want to set the emotional tone, and you want to preview the message so you know where the audience is going. Now, how do you actually do this? So first, attention getter. Like I said, I'm going to talk about in a second ways to have really creative attention getters, but you always want to start your speech with something that's going to hook in the audience, something that's going to not only give them an idea where your topic is, but also get them interested, get them engaged in what you're about to say. A thesis statement, so this is covering the main idea of your speech. We've already set this up, but obviously you do want to put this in the introduction. Your relevancy statement or your value step, so this is telling the audience why they should be interested in the speech. Ethos, so this is telling you why you should be listening, right? The audience, why they should be listening to you as a speaker. And the preview, this is breaking down how you are actually going to talk about the topic in your speech, sort of like a map. So let's go through some of these. First off, the attention getter. So there's a few things you want to think about. One is this needs to be creative. If you just come up and say, my speech is about da-da-da-da-da, already you've lost the audience. So it's important that you do something creative, but it's also important that it's short, right? Your introduction should not take up a huge portion of your speech, and the attention getter is just one of 5 steps in the actual introduction. So you want to keep it to about 45-50 seconds, especially if you're using a video. So some options that you have, I just mentioned videos a second ago. Quotes, right, if they're very dramatically read, that can work. Statistics, jokes, pop culture references, props involving the audience. So once again, engaging your audience, that could actually be something you do to start your speech. These are just some recommendations. You are not limited to these, but any of these can work. So what I want to do now is actually look at some examples of really effective attention getters, just so you can see how professional speakers do this.
I need to make a confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret, something that I'm not particularly proud of, something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know, but that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal. In the late 1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now,
I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation.
We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, 221 years ago, in a hall that still stands across the street, a group of men gathered and with these simple words launched America's improbable experiment in democracy. Farmers and scholars, statesmen and patriots who had traveled across the ocean to escape tyranny and...
I can't thank you guys for the opportunity. Let me tell you something. If tomorrow wasn't promised, what would you give for today? Forget everything else. Forget everything else. Forget that there was any sunlight left. What would you spend today thinking about? Yourself or the man that's beside you?
When I spoke here last winter, this nation was facing the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We were losing an average of 700,000 jobs per month. Credit was frozen, and our financial system was on the verge of collapse. As any American who is still looking for work or a way to pay their bills will tell you, we are by no means out of the woods. A full and vibrant recovery is still many months away. And I will not let up until those Americans who seek jobs can find them.
So those were a lot of really good examples of what you should be doing for your speech. So you were able to see the ways in which humor, examples, all sorts of things can effectively be utilized. The next thing we need to talk about is the value step or relevancy statement. So this is going to tell the audience why this is interesting for them, right? Why is this important? So you need to identify what specifically they can get out of it, right? If it's maybe a health topic, you could say, you know, understanding this can help you become healthier. Or if it's a scientific topic, maybe this will help your understanding of the world around you. So make sure that you're also adding in a statement that really helps your audience understand why they should be listening to the speech. Another thing we're adding in here, and this is going back to Aristotle, so remember he is considered the father of rhetoric, and another theory he had about rhetoric is that what's really important for a speaker is their ethos. So he defines ethos here as one's character, right? And this is how you establish that you are credible and that you have character coming into the speech. Now you might be thinking, how do I add ethos, right? How do I establish my character? How do I use that? Well, there's two different ways. So one, you can establish a personal, professional, or academic connection to the topic. And there's a few different ways you could do this. So let me give you some examples. Majoring in nutrition, I know the importance of a well-balanced diet, right? So that's using your specific major, and then you tell the audience why you are informed or credible on the topic. I clean up the beaches every Saturday morning and have seen the devastation litter can cause. And then another one, having a family full of medical professionals, I can tell you how important it is to pay attention to your heart rate. So all of these are examples of using some sort of connection that you have to the topic, whether you study it, whether it's in your job field, whether you have some sort of personal or family connection to it, that's what you want to use. Now you may be thinking at this point, okay, well what if I just picked a topic because I thought it was interesting? You know, I'm not studying it, I don't really have a connection to it, but you know, it's something that I like. Am I not going to be able to create ethos? Well, you can also discuss your research. So if you don't have those connections, you can say, basically having extensively researched all the options for fuel-efficient cars, I can tell you which ones are best. Now this is just one example. You don't have to follow this exact format, but you do need some sort of statement that establishes your character or credibility on the speech. So that is introductions. Let's look at an example first, just so I can make sure you're clear on all of this. So this is the example speech that I have on my faculty page. This particular student did a speech on textbooks. So the attention getter, I'll just kind of pause here so you can read through it. This is a narrative that uses humor, so it actually touches on two of the things that I talked about. This has a non-factual source. It's also using humor, which is an effective way to engage the audience. So keep in mind, you can kind of double up. You do actually have to have non-factuals in your speech. I will be requiring that. So if you want to use one as the attention getter, that's perfectly fine. Then the student goes into the relevancy statement or the value step, right? So he says, you know, while we may not have fainted, we've all experienced sticker shock that comes with pain for books every semester. So again, value step is connecting the audience. Ethos. This student actually uses both of the things. They're a college student, so they have personal experience and he's research. So he also has that as well. You don't have to use both. One is fine. The thesis statement, remember this is the main idea. What is it that your speech is going to be covering? So here the student says, college textbooks are very expensive. Although students can't control soaring textbook prices, they can make informed decisions. So really informing how you purchase your textbooks. And then last but not least, previewing the main point. So this is where it breaks down. Where and how students can buy their books, renting and borrowing, and then last but not least, selling them back. Now, 3 points is usually typical in an outline. If you need, say, 4 points, you can do that, though be careful on time. Sometimes, though, I have students who only need 2 points, right? If they maybe have a lot in each point and they just can't find a third one, that's okay. Also keep in mind this order is not a hard and fast rule, right? You do have to start with the attention getter, but let's say you want to do your ethos first and then your relevancy step, that's perfectly fine as well. Another thing to keep in mind, so this is the worksheet that I also am going to be emailing. This goes through and breaks down all of the different things that you'll need for the speech. It kind of specifically says each of them, so you can keep this. And of course, if you're having trouble breaking down your points or creating your thesis, remember in class we were just using this. So your thesis and then breaking down each of the points, so you can use that as well. So now that we've finished with introductions, let's talk about the body of the speech. Now, this is going to be in topical order. By topical order, all I really mean is you have to basically figure out a theme for the subset of points. So it's really up to you. Unlike the persuasive speech and the argumentative speech, which are going to have much more focused organizational structures, the informative speech is very flexible. A couple of things that you have to do for the outline: it has to be in full sentences. You must add development to your points, and I'm going to speak about what I mean by that, but basically you need to add material in. And you, like I said, don't have to follow a specific format. So let me show you both a format that you can kind of follow and then what the example outline looks like, so you can see how this would actually be done when you start the writing process. So again, going back to the speech framer, this is what we used in class. So if you have already filled out, you've kind of figured out the thematic development of your speech. But basically, again, just kind of breaking down what issues do you want to address. Really think, what is it that I want my audience to walk away with from the speech? This is the other article that I showed you. This again you'll have access to on my faculty page, and I'll be emailing it to you. So just like I showed you with the introduction, it goes through. So it'll tell you, here's what the first point, it should be basically telling you what it is, and then this is how you want to organize it. So you want to have some supporting evidence. By in-depth analysis over here, let me close up just so you can see what I'm looking at. So by in-depth analysis, just adding information to what you use for your source. So supporting evidence is going to be your actual resource and the research that you found. Non-factual source, you can put that in here. Now, again, you'll notice I'm doing supporting evidence, in-depth analysis, non-factual, in-depth analysis, engage the audience. You don't have to do that in that specific order. These are just things that I really want to keep in mind. and then more development if needed. You'll have to do a transition, and we'll be talking about how to create those in class. And then it's the same thing for all of the other points. So keep in mind, these are things you want to do. You could have, 3 forms of supporting evidence in your third point and maybe no non-factuals. That's perfectly fine, but you do want to have at least one non-factual in the speech and one place where you engage the audience. As far as an example to look at, so this is going back to the textbook example. So body, they have the first point. So again, remember from the preview, right, we're talking about where and how students can buy the books. Now, notice they're not copying and pasting the point. So a lot of times students will have the exact same point. You do not want to do that. So first, they're saying some prefer the convenience, but using Booksmart can be very helpful. And then, of course, they bring up examples of different places they can order the books. Now, notice too, so this is where your source material comes in. And you might notice in this student example, the student didn't actually start with their source. You don't have to. Those are recommendations and things you want to keep in mind. They have according to, so like I talked about in the last video, you do have to cite. And then he actually gives a specific example of a textbook. Going down, this is another source, right? So this is actually a book, and then of course talking about it, and then a transition to the other point. Again, another source, they're quoting the author, and then also giving a quote. So remember, it's really important that you do that for citing your material in the actual outline. And then again, adding more material. So I know I'm being kind of vague with talking about how to set up the outline, but especially for the informative speech, like I said, it's very flexible. It's really just about you adding material to better inform the audience. Once you figure out how you're going to break down your points, it's going to be much easier to do this. And then the research will really help kind of guide you on where you want to go. Going back to the outline format that I had pulled up earlier, keep in mind if you just want to erase this material and then start typing, textbooks are great, right? If you want to start typing into that, that's perfectly fine. Again, keep in mind, sometimes I'll have students who, for their first point, will just put where to go or something, and then they'll just put Booksmart, right? And then for their in-depth analysis, it'll be like, it's cheaper. That is not enough. You have to actually put in a lot more material. Now, the outline itself really should give me a good idea of where you're going to be going in the speech. So all of your information, resources, those should be in there. And if you want to type into this document, that's perfectly fine. Again, keep in mind, it doesn't have to be this order. It's not that rigid, but these are things that you want to actually add into the speech.
And the last thing we need to talk about are conclusions. So a lot of students will say things like, I'm done, or okay, that's it. Nope, you're not done, and that's not okay, because you do actually need a conclusion. So sometimes students will be like, okay, I finished the intro, I finished my body, that's it. If I don't know when you've concluded the speech, if you have to actually tell me that you're done, you haven't effectively concluded the speech. So there's a couple of things that you need to do in the conclusion. 1, be memorable, end with impact. Just like the attention getter at the beginning of the speech, you should end just like you started, right? You want to engage the audience. You also want to be clear, right? If you spent all this time researching, organizing, setting up this speech, you want to make sure your audience at the end of the day knows what they got from it, and it's important to summarize. The last thing, be brief. So the conclusion should not take a long time. This should actually be the shortest part of your speech. So no more than 2 minutes. That's especially if you have longer speeches. For the informative speech, I would say a 1 minute. When you get into the longer ones, persuasive, argumentative, 2 minutes, yes, but for the most part, keep it short. So, techniques for concluding. A few different things. You can use a quote. This is similar to the attention getter. A narrative. Call for action, especially for the persuasive and argumentative speech, or refer to the beginning, right? You can maybe go back to your attention getter and relate it. Now, just a reminder, quote and narrative, right? Those count as non-factual sources. So you can put those non-factual sources all sorts of places. You're not required just to put them in the body of the speech. So here's an example. So So we will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. So see if you can guess which technique this actually is. I'll give you a second. All right, so if you thought that it was quoting, correct, right? This is a famous quote from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Let me give you another example. Capital punishment does not deter crime, but it does kill the poor, innocent, and disenfranchised, and it will never bring back the innocent dead. It is time to abandon revenge and honor life. So for this one, if you guessed call for action, you are correct. So those are just two examples of what you can do in the conclusion. But make sure, like I said, that you are actually using the conclusion. It's an important part of the step.
So homework, here's what you need to do. 1, answer these questions. What is ethos and the value step? I want to make sure you understand them. What 2 canons did this lecture focus on? What do you need to do in the conclusion? I just discussed that, so that should be pretty easy. And 4th, and this is the most important thing, if you do not have this, I won't even count you bringing in homework. So you might as well not even waste your time answering the other questions if you can't do this one. You need to complete your full introduction. So you need to have your attention getter, your value step, your ethos, your thesis, and your preview. All of this has to be fully completed, totally done. Otherwise, I won't count this for homework. Keep in mind, while you have to start with your attention getter and end with your preview, again, you can kind of mix these steps. You can even sometimes combine them. So answer these questions, come up with the introduction for your speech. So by now you should already have your sources and your topic. If not, then you need to contact me ASAP to make sure that you are still on the right track and that you are getting through in a timely manner, because these speeches are going to be starting